We'll start off things today with a question from Andrew. Andrew writes in regarding our thoughts on the SWFA SS 5-20 by 50 HD scope. He wonders, how does it compare to a better class of scopes? And of course, any thoughts on the Vortex line?
Well, that's a good question. We got a lot of questions about them SWFA variable scopes. And if you look back on a podcast, I kind of stick by my general conclusion. I really had a lot of enthusiasm for the fixed power optics due to their incredible value. For $300, you could get a fixed 10, which was actually a military contract scope that had very, very reliable turret adjustment mechanisms. So when you would crank your knobs on the scope, it would adjust very reliably. And for $299, that's a pretty good feat to accomplish. When you're talking about the variable SWFA scopes, they kind of expanded on that design to include the variable zoom feature, and that does reduce on the inherent ruggedness of the design, so keep that in mind. It's not going to be quite as rugged as a straight power scope for the amount of dollars spent per whatever value. But when you compare it to some of your other scopes, I think that it's a fair price probably for dollar value for if you compare it with other scopes in the same feature set, first focal plane, variable scopes with high definition glass. I think that it's a competitive scope. There's nothing wrong with it if you compare it to other scopes in its class. It's not as good of a value probably as the fixed power optics in my opinion. That's where the enthusiasm generated from with my SWFA scope reviews was from the fixed power optics, because there's so much value in just having the turret mechanisms operate properly. That was something that I really liked. But with the popularity of variable scopes, yeah, you add a lot more money to get a little bit more feature, but at a lot less reliability in terms of mechanical ruggedness and things like that. So they're decent scopes. If you buy a SWFA variable HD scope, you're going to get actually very nice optic. I've seen quite a few of the new ones. They got some lower power configurations and they got some higher power configurations, and the HD glass will actually get you good performance beyond 12 power magnification. So if you want a higher power scope above 12 power, you want the HD glass. That'll actually help you out. When you compare it to some of the other scopes, I think it's a fair value. When you're asking about the Vortex line, it's something that I've been hesitant to really talk about a lot because I'm still in the process of reviewing a lot of different Vortex optics. I've had my hands on quite a few PST Vortex scopes, and the HD model, the old generation, and the new generation that's come out, the AMG model. I have collected a lot of data on those as well, and I think Vortex is getting better. They're getting a lot closer to the goal mark. I'm still hesitating to put out my endorsement on the Vortex line. I've had some mixed experience with Vortex. Some of the PST models we had did not operate as advertised, if we could put it like that. I did get a chance to try the customer service situation on a few of the ones we've had. I've had the Spark in, some of the red dot configuration optics as well. And we've tried some of the PSTs on various rifles. Some of them work really good, but then some of them maybe don't work as well. And that's really a matter of quality control procedures. And when you talk about some of these optics that are made in Asia, you have some issues with quality control, especially when they're being provided at a price that's not your tier 1 or even tier 2 price category range. Vortex has an incredible feature set. They're very well designed, a very good concept. The challenge really is in finding an outfit that can manufacture these things to the degree of quality that's needed for the discerning shooter. And for the standard market, I'm sure Vortex is fine. But for people in this particular craft that we're talking about, in this particular community of long-range precision shooting, has more of a discerning taste when it comes to optics. I can't really be enthusiastic quite yet on the Vortex brand in general, especially the PST line. Some of the HD stuff has very nice quality glass. You'll definitely have a good first impression when you look through one at the gun store in terms of optical quality. They're very good glass on some of these optics, especially the HD Vortex glass. Very nice looking scopes. They feel solid. The feature sets are correct. They're designed very smart. I really like their advertising, their instructions. Everything's communicated very well with their optics. The challenges that they maybe need to work on a little more is some of the quality control, like I said before. Even some of their flagship models and even the AMGs, they're actually breaking some ground here and coming out with a scope that's produced with enough of the components made in America to where they can call it a 100% made in America scope, which actually I do respect, and I think that that's incredible. And you should show your support for these optics, especially if it's made in America. I think that that gives it a certain amount of points just all by itself, because nothing's made in America in terms of optics anymore. But the AMG series is a really good scope. But in terms of, like I said, the discerning audience and the Rex Reviews podcast and the Rex Reviews Sniper 101 series, they still have a little room for improvement. I like half of the ones, the tracking still, it's very hard to get it to be exactly precise if you don't have a team of experienced engineers thoroughly vetting each particular optic and custom fitting all the parts together. So some of the other Asian manufacturers have that down pat, but they're also going to charge you a pretty penny for it. So Vortex Optics is getting closer. They're definitely getting good with the AMG line, but in terms of value for the price they charge, there's other stuff out there that I'm more enthusiastic about. I'm not against Vortex, but it's a tough topic for me because I like to be enthusiastic and encourage development. But I do give my hats off to Vortex for their configuration, how they design their optics, very good design characteristics, and they have a little bit of work to go in terms of quality control, in my opinion. But other than that, that's my opinion. What do you say, Lew?
I'm no expert in the field. That's why they write in to ask you, sir. And that's why I'm here to ask the questions.
Evading the hot seat. Oh, did I talk a lot? You see, when it's a hard question, I talk more. I have a hard time doing a negative review. But I wouldn't give Vortex a negative review. There's a lot of good positives about them.
Good stuff. And thanks again for writing in, Mr. Andrew. Next up today, we've got one from Frederick, and Frederick writes in today, "Hello, I love your videos. I've just gotten started into the Sniper 101 videos. I've loved everything that I've seen and really appreciate how easy the information is to digest and how helpful it is. I do have a question. I don't really like to post things publicly, so I thought I would try this email route instead."
Well, no one knows which Frederick it is. There's probably at least 40 Fredericks in the world.
At least
40 Fredericks. Okay, so Frederick, your identity is safe with us.
I apologize if it's covered in a video I haven't seen yet, but I'm really excited about the bullet videos about the 308. I own a decent semi-auto 308, and I'm excited to try to use that to reach out to further distances with some of these new projectiles, but wondered if I needed to consider size with the higher BC projectiles. Will some of them not feed properly with magazine size constraints? Is the way they chamber different between bolt guns and semi-autos? I'm sure you're quite busy, so I understand you probably have a lot of things to respond to, so I appreciate it even if you read this, and will appreciate any kind of response.
Well, that's a good question, and that's something I don't load those Elco bullets, I think is what he's probably referring to, and some of the other extremely high ballistic coefficient hybrids made by Berger and some of that. When you're talking about reloading for semi-automatic platforms and any platform where you depend on using the magazine of the rifle to feed your ammo, a lot of these long-range bullets are seated kind of long, because to get that long, sleek profile, they got to stick out really far and be long and sleek, right? And the problem is with the semi-autos is you got a magazine that's limited to a certain length, so you have to load them in a certain distance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can't really do that in some cases. The contour of the bullet won't allow it to crimp or tighten up on the proper place, right? So you have cartridge overall length considerations to adjust for. When you talk about semi-automatic 308 platforms, I typically use the battle ammo, because in that particular configuration of rifle, it's not my dedicated long-range rifle. On bolt actions, of course, you can single feed, so you have more liberty in that direction, but I still use Accuracy International magazines on a lot of those. But that's something you're going to have to check with Elco on, and ask them if they've got any load data for seating the bullets that far in them. So as a general trend, you have to look at that. But that's a very good question, and it's almost infinitely complex when you talk about the different bullet selection choices out there without asking about a specific bullet. But yeah, you have to be very conscious of how long you can seat your bullet. What's your maximum cartridge overall length that you can get away with before it doesn't feed your magazine?
A lot of variables to consider there.
There's a lot of variables there. And it would be a 6-hour discussion to get into all that. But yeah, you can check with the manufacturer of whatever, if you're looking at Berger, Alco, Hornady, Sierra, whatever bullet manufacturer, you can ask them, can these be loaded to a cartridge overall length that fits your particular magazine, and measure. And you don't want to get it tight. You want a little bit of wiggle room in your magazine. And I mean, that's even up to interpretation what wiggle room is defined as. But you want enough room for them things to be able to feed reliably.
So it's a good call to just go to the manufacturer and do a little more research.
Yeah, go to the manufacturer. They're usually quite helpful. It's hard for one guy to keep track of all that different stuff. Reloading manuals will often give you pretty good information on your cartridge overall lengths and stuff like that too, in terms of what's the proper overall length. So you can look at that data is what I would direct you towards.
Awesome. Thanks again for writing in, Frederick. Next up today, we've got one from Travis. He says, "Hey, Rex team, just wanted to say the YouTube channel is great and the podcast is awesome. I drive a truck and listen to podcasts all day and love your format. Normally, I'm put off by religious stuff, but I have to say the way you approach it, I enjoyed the discussion, i.e. non-Bible thumper goody two-shoes."
Well, we're not goody two-shoes, that's for sure.
Some of us aren't. My question is about shooting in my heavily forested, dense vegetation area called the Pacific Northwest.
Oh, yeah, the Cascades. That's beautiful country. Yep.
Absolutely. I'm new to shooting with optics, used to compete in school with irons, and have only ever shot with irons. So we don't have any really long-distance places to shoot, maybe up to 300 to 500 yards. What sort of magnification should I be looking for at that range? A fixed 6 like SWFA or the new SIG Tango 6 1:6 if you've seen those, very interesting package. Many options are a no-go for me because of reticle. I'm doing load development, and between long-range shooting and the other CQB craze, it's hard to find good options that aren't orientated in one direction or the other, or hunting. Thanks, I know it's an annoying question, don't really expect an answer, and love the show.
Well, right on, man. I appreciate you watching, and that Cascade Mountain stuff is definitely dense vegetation. I did live up there as a homeless person at one time in my adventures in life, and I thought that...
Some of your best stories come from that portion of life there, Mr. Rex.
But no, I've tried everything, man, and I'm just a creature on this planet, open for an adventure. But to answer your questions here... you're asking about 0 to 600, is that what you're saying?
300 to 500 yards, and...
Well, from 300 to 500, if you still got decent eyesight, irons, especially in the rainy Northwest, is a very good way to go. When you got rain, it's very hard to work with any kind of optics, unless you got a sunshade. Now, if you do really want to use optics, you can use a quick detach lever. I think that for 600 meters, especially when you're talking about that forested stuff, a 1:6 power is an incredible configuration because you're going to want 1 power for point blank stuff. And then honestly, like, to tell the truth, like, I've used 1 power, talking about 2-minute of angle, red dots and stuff, out to 300 yards with an 8-point PRO. You're familiar with that, Lou. You've got one on your AR. And they're a good optic out to 300. So even I've shot steel out to 500 and 600 with a 8-point PRO. Or a 8-point M4 or whatever. You know, it doesn't matter. If you've got discerning eyeball is the question. If you do want an optic, a 1:6 power variable scope in the proper configuration can get you quite well equipped. If you want to spend the least amount of money, you might want to hang out for our next portion of the show where we interview a guy who actually specializes in exactly the optic you are probably looking for. So it's interesting you write that in there. There's some optics where they use reticle designs. Ballistic drop compensation is totally manageable within 600 meters. You don't really need to dial in your scope in terms of turret adjustments and calculate calculating and precise firing solution, accommodating for all your different air density changes and different climatic effects. If you have a good optical design in terms of reticles, you can shoot from 0 to 600 pretty effectively. There's the ACSS reticles available in the Trijicon TA31, which is very effective. And we're actually going to interview the guy today on the Rex Reviews podcast, Dimitri, a buddy of mine. We visit quite a bit. He's the guy that designed the reticle on the TA31, and it's a very good reticle. And for an application such as yours in a Cascades, where you might reach out from 0 to 600 and you don't want to screw around, and in a high cover environment where you got a lot of targets hiding behind the bushes up there in the Cascades, you need to take a shot right now. You can't look at your calculator. Certain ballistic drop compensating reticles, particularly ones with the reticle design like this, where you can do in moving target engagement and wind hold-offs without doing any kind of calculation, are going to be highly advantageous. So stay tuned for the Primary Arms interview with Dimitri, our buddy, coming up here soon on the show. So hang tight there, man. We'll answer the rest of that question soon.
And he does have a second portion to the question here, actually. He says, P.S. The podcast feed doesn't show up except the first episode in a couple podcast apps. Not sure about iTunes. Need to play from SoundCloud. Hope you guys get it on Stitcher or iTunes so more people can stumble across the podcast who didn't know Rex from YouTube.
Hey, so about the RSS feed, our main website that we output information through is SoundCloud. The RSS feed is generated on there, and then we take it and put it out to iTunes, and it updates by itself. So these other podcast apps don't always have updated RSS feeds because they're not pulling it from those two outlets. So the way to update your podcast app is to copy the RSS URL, which is located on the SoundCloud website. When you go under the Rex Reviews podcast on the SoundCloud, go to the Content tab, and you'll be able to copy the link. You can copy that link and input it to any of your podcast apps, and it'll automatically update for you.
I'm confused, Lew. That's why we have her here. She's of good help.
She makes that all so easy. And thanks again, Travis, for writing in from the Pacific Northwest. Next up today, we've got one from Chris. He writes in today, I have very much so enjoyed your time and effort to put together such a thorough, informative series such as Sniper 101. I also enjoy your mortality and religious videos. Your latest video, The 10 Commandments, you touched on figurative versus literal translation. I believe you did so to make the point that the message has value and relevance regardless of the story. I was wondering if you had looked at the teachings from a perspective of eternal progression, not so much as who is better or a competition, but more of a way to refine oneself in a manner that will be advantageous to you beyond this world. On a different subject, shooting, your knowledge helped me tremendously. I have only one rifle as my finances are obligated elsewhere. However, your system was an amazing guide in helping me choose the right one for me. It's a simple Remington 700 ADL chambered with the 7mm Remington mag. I'm using a Super Sniper 6-power fixed scope and a Harris bipod. I'm progressing into the 1,000 to 1,200 meter range, and I feel quite confident up to 850 meters.
Good.
Your teaching has been invaluable to my success, and I am very grateful to have such a solid shooting platform on a very tight budget. Thank you very much. And thank you for writing in today, Mr. Chris. And that's an interesting religious philosophical thing there. Almost kind of harkens to the tenets of like reincarnation or Buddhism.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's a valid point, honestly. The Judeo-Christian perspective, at least in old school terms, was that at some point everyone would be resurrected, and if you continued on to the next world, part of the deal is learning stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now there's different philosophical schools of thought that when you die, you're automatically upgraded and you know everything and you become like a god creature and all this. But a lot of folks still think that, when it's a progression. And I think that absolutely is true in some degrees. And I don't know if I would subscribe to everything that particular term maybe subscribes, because I don't know exactly who came up with it. But insofar as much as like progression beyond this life, absolutely, the law has value not only for yourself in this life and for the continuation of the species, which is what we kind of zeroed in on the topic when you're talking about the law of God. But when you progress on to the next life, assuming that happens, right, I would imagine that would have incredible value as perspective. How can you enjoy eternity? Or how can you continue to, you know what I'm saying? How can you continue to enjoy the ride if you don't remember the backdrop of what you came through? Because that's where true character development occurs, and that's where the trial of the fire is really purifying the element, is to remember the strife and the struggle and the deep contrast. Now that we have the knowledge of good and evil, since Adam and Eve, right, they were given that knowledge because they wanted it. So the Creator, because he's not a tyrant, didn't allow him not to have the knowledge. That would have been very easy to do. He just not let them have it. But he allowed them to pursue a path that he warned them not to go down because it would be very rough. But being that they go down it, they can now learn from this perspective of all the different, like, okay, if you do this, what happens? If you do this, they have a greater understanding of the why question of why did God give these laws? Because if you don't follow them, life is going to suck. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
In a real quick, concise term. And you're not going to be happy either. It's funny, people who participate in destructive behavior patterns are really not as happy. And I know this from my own experience, man. Like, there's certain things, we all do in life that we do, and it's like, seems like the thing to do, like the short-term benefits all great and awesome, and then you do it, and then you feel like a piece of garbage like 10 seconds later. You know what I'm saying? And so when you're talking about stuff like that, I mean, in the long term, we're just not geared that way. But the collective experience we have in our struggles through life, in my opinion, are carried on into that next life for our benefit, for sure, but also for the benefit of those around us. So it's not just a simple one-dimensional field, as we had in other discussions,
And it's a progression thing, too, I think. It's like some of the schools of Buddhism that teach reincarnation, and you come back and you're kind of on a ladder, and depending upon how you acted during your previous life, you either move up or you move down. And the whole goal of it in the Buddhist school is to escape the wheel of reincarnation, to escape the cycle of suffering that is life. And that's kind of a hardcore view of it, but I like the idea that you can learn from your previous life and then try to move on to something bigger and better.
And I think in a general sense, man, I think that's kind of one of those universal truths, is that this whole life, dude, is a test and a learning objective system.
Absolutely.
Like this deal that we have to struggle through, it's like these circumstances of this planet, which are ridiculous, are thrown under our lap, and then like, okay, what are you going to do? That's the lesson. It's how do you respond to that which is thrown to you? Like they deal you a bad hand of cards, how do you play them? They deal you a really good hand of cards? Well, that's a whole nother challenge in a different way, right? Because if you're given a good hand, it's very challenging in one way to keep it straight. And if you're dealt a bad hand, then it's a challenge to keep it positive.
Yep.
So, and I think that, all the stuff we encounter in life is along those lines. That's a good way to view it, in my opinion. And it's funny you mentioned the reincarnation situation. It's interesting because Judeo-Christianity was kind of teaching kind of a form of reincarnation, at least in the early days. And then, later on, it kind of morphed into a different system. But there's some of the more traditional branches of Christianity recite the Apostles' Creed. And they talk about the resurrection of the dead and the life of the world to come. And they hold the view that people are resurrected into a new life after this life. And does it keep continuing forever? It doesn't maybe indicate that in the Judeo-Christian perspective, but at least once it happens, according to Judeo-Christianity, is that there's a resurrection, and then the people are all kind of woken up again, and you move on to the next plane or whatever.
One of my favorite characters, I don't know if we can call them that, but folks from the study of Buddhism is guys that are called Bodhis or Bodhisattvas, and they're the guys that have achieved enlightenment. They could escape the wheel if they wanted to, but they choose not to.
Is that them orange-colored guys with all the stuff smeared on their heads?
Those are the Oompa Loompas.
No. You know what I'm talking about, don't you, Lew?
Yeah, but...
No, not the airport guys. The guys over who live in the holes in the cliffs and just smoke weed all day?
No, but I need to look into that. But
I never participated. I met one, though.
The Bodies, their whole thing is that they could have escaped the cycle of life and death, but they choose to stick around because they feel it's their mission to try to spread good and try to encourage other people to improve their lives.
Kind of like prophets or messianic figures then. Yeah.
Exactly. Same deal. It's religious figures that are doing it out of love and self-sacrifice for the rest of the population to help everybody else.
I think that the creator would send prophets or guys like that who had access to escape and evade, because once you reach enlightenment, how selfish would it be to just upload into the next level, see? And then just, guys, I'm out of here. Like, you figure it out. Well, that's not very nice.
It's better to stick around and
throw us a clue or something.
Yeah, really, yeah.
And so if you look even in the other perspectives of religion, that's a common theme. It really is that there's the guys who kind of got to talk with the creator, whether it be Moses or some of these other guys from other outfits, and they're kind of communicating what they had learned and hanging around to kind of continue the upload. You know, it's a noble cause, I would think.
To try to continue the progression of truth and the human species.
Amen, dude. I think that's not a bad deal.
Absolutely. So I don't know if that answers the question or not, but...
Probably created 6,000 questions and answered one.
Amen.
Next up, we've got one from Troy. He writes in today, got a 10x42 from listening to the YouTube series. Love it and the series. I know you seem to mention the 10 power as a good deal. I should mention in the subject line, he's got the SWFA.
Sure.
How about a 12 power and a 16 power? Is 12 power as good as the 10? Seems that I remember you mentioning diminishing returns on anything over 15 or so for clarity, etc.
Yeah, 12 power is going to give you a little bit more zoom. 10 power even, honestly, for close target acquisition, if you're hunting, if you're shooting bad guys, or you're shooting coyotes or deer within 100 meters, dude, you're going to struggle even with the 10 power unless you're like really in the zone with your scope and it can just bring it up nonchalant, subconscious, like bended aiming concept kind of situation going on. You know what I'm saying? Like with the 10 power, even is a little bit too much magnification for most applications inside a couple hundred yards. Some guys would think it's too much horsepower then. A 12 power, I think, in my opinion, if you're shooting beyond 1,000 meters kind of regularly, like in that 1,200 to 1,500 meter range, like if you got a 7mm Magnum or a big belted Magnum and you're going to really push it beyond 1,000 regularly, or if you're going to consistently shoot on that 1,000 meter range bracket, then a 12 power will give you a little more close in picture of what you're shooting at. 16 power, in my opinion, from my experience, I've shot 16s on 50 cals and stuff, and it works fine for those applications, but honestly, it's too much power, in my opinion. You don't get any actual increase in being able to see what you're shooting at 16 power. You can see everything on 16 power that you see on 10 power, except on 10 power or 12 power, you have a way better field of view. And so if stuff is going on the periphery of where you would have seen on 16, you'll see it on 10. Whereas 16, you're so zoomed in, you can't hardly see what the heck's going on. And without the option of variable, it's like almost difficult to use unless you're shooting at paper or steel or something at 16 power. I would kind of recommend, dude, you can engage like normal size targets out to 2K or a mile with a 10 power scope if you've got a discerning eyeball. So, 16 is not super useful unless you're going cuckoo long range dedicated rifle, like maybe a 50 caliber hard target interdiction system or something.
Good stuff there. And thanks again for writing in, Mr. Troy. Moving on today, we've got one from Joe. And he writes in today concerning rifle weatherizing. Rex, have you done an episode on weatherizing your rifle? If so, could you point me to it? If not, that would be nice. I've read of guys who had their triggers freeze on trophy hunts in Alaska. Thanks, Joe.
Good question. Weatherizing a rifle depends on what kind of weather you're going to be operating in. If you're in a highly corrosive environment, like on the West Coast, like the previous guy was talking about, the Cascades and stuff where you got salt water conditions, spray, and the mist is, you got corrosive environments. Or if you're, right on the shore of a ocean or something, you're going to want stainless steel, and you're going to want to use a little bit more oil on anything that can corrode. So you might want to run a patch down your bore with a little bit of oil on it, like a synthetic lubricant, just to keep it from corroding. And in any environment, honestly, some of the high-tech paints out there, whether it be Duracoat or Cerakote, are going to give you incredible corrosion resistance. It's like ridiculous how amazing it is. You'll never have to worry about rust if you Duracoat your rifle. I've Duracoated quite a few of my weapons, and it holds up pretty darn tough. Cerakote's good too. I got a couple that are Cerakoted, and that's actually a pretty good fail-safe way to make sure at least the external components are not going to corrode on you. But in all honesty, it's not really the external components you got to worry about in terms of weatherization. It's your internal stuff. Your bore is the critical part of the rifle that makes it shoot good. So if you've got a stainless steel barrel, that's huge. A 4140 normal blued steel barrel is going to corrode pretty easily if you're in a corrosive environment. Now, if you're talking about cold weather, which is what this guy was talking about with Alaska, that's terms of lubrication. If you improperly lubricate your rifle for extreme cold weather circumstances. Now, this is something I've seen some contention on. People argue about, like, over-lubrication of rifles. Some people say you can over-lube your rifle, and then other people do demos where they dip the entire rifle in oil and it still shoots. Well, that's at ambient air conditions for standard atmosphere and pressure in clean environments, right? If you got clean oil on a gun at 65 degrees Fahrenheit, you can dip it in oil. You can submerge it in oil for like 1,000 years and then pull it out and shoot it, and it's fine. You know what I'm saying? Like, and we'll use an AR-15 as kind of an example because that's a particular design that's more finicky to maybe hanging up or something. When you're talking about cold weather, dude, oil starts to slow down. It'll inhibit you. And I don't know if you guys have experienced cold weather, but like I've operated in stuff that's like 70 below Fahrenheit when you're talking about in terms of wind chill, and a solid 30 and 40 below without wind chill. And I've done actually a lot of checking on bolt actions and semi-autos in those conditions to see how they work over time. And I'll tell you that there is truth to over-lubrication. If you put too much lube on your rifle in extreme cold weather, it will pretty much freeze. Particularly, you need to pay attention to your firing pin. On a bolt action, that's kind of the critical point. The trigger and the trigger should not, you don't need to lube your trigger ever. Like, especially on a bolt action design, you don't want to get lube in there. That's going to be a bad situation, especially in cold weather. It's going to attract dust. There's no need for that. On a big, crude AR-15, yeah, you don't need to lube your trigger, just in general terms. You don't want to over lubricate the hole where your firing pin comes through to strike. If that thing ices up or whatever, or slows down, it'll lighten your primer strike and it'll give you misfires. So when you're talking trigger mechanism and firing pin, all that stuff, you want to be kind of dry. If you're talking extreme cold weather circumstances, the very most you want a microscopic film of very thin oil. Like I'm talking one drop of very thin oil spread out on the entire whole gun. And that should be like more than plenty. Unless you're in highly corrosive environments, I actually, because I've been so familiar with the cold weather deal, I run a lot of my stuff very dry. That's my default position, is just to lube them dry. So lube them dry. Yeah, you know what I mean.
So where in the world does it actually get 70 below zero at? That's my question.
In the polar vortex, Lew.
Oh, my goodness.
You've been there. I was there with you once, remember?
It's a special kind of hell on earth, isn't it?
It is. It's glorious. I actually got a couple ARs all lubed up with some high-temperature axle grease because that's what I run in the summertime. And I'm curious, if you run a thick shooting grease in -20, like, when exactly does it freeze up? Because I've been doing battle testing trying to get ARs to jam up, and in the last month I've been very successful running suppressors. Like, dude, suppressors make stuff so dirty, it's ridiculous.
Ooh,
like, it's like one shot equals 10 shots in fouling, and it becomes like this plastic, gritty, sandy, like, gunk everywhere within 300 rounds. And in cold weather, with a little bit of moisture, it is total failure. And so if you run into suppressor in cold weather, you have to clean it every day. Like on a stoner gas impingement system, you have to clean it. So, yeah, just more details on future reviews.
Interesting stuff there. And thanks for writing in today, once again, Joe. Next up today, we've got one from Paul, who writes in, Rex, I just wanted to say thank you for all your efforts. I live in Texas, and I discovered the Sniper 101 series approximately 2 years ago. Although I do not plan to shoot 1,000 yards, I found much of the information valuable and numerous applications for students/shooting enthusiasts that I instruct or speak with. I do have one question, possibly for the podcast or YouTube. Have you reviewed or used the 1-4x24 SWFA tactical rifle scope?
Oh boy, I was playing with one in a parking lot last week.
Really?
Yeah.
He says, I am currently using the SWFA 12x42 millimeters mil for their simplicity, ruggedness, and reticle design. I guess the question is, aside for the weakness of the variable power design, are the patrol rifle series as dependable as the original SWFA scopes? Thanks again for your time and to the crew of the Rex Reviews. Paul.
That's a good question because there's a couple different things fighting against each other. You know, look at the original SWFA scope. It's a fixed power optic. It's going to be very inherently rugged in terms of simplicity. You talk about the 1-4 and you have different objective lens weight configurations. And generally speaking, in terms of semi-automatic ruggedness, sometimes a smaller objective lens diameter seems to be more rugged in terms of not flying apart under a forward recoil impulse that is generated by some of the semi-automatic rifle designs. So the 1-4 is, I would imagine, would be pretty rugged for a lot of applications. I like a lot of those. It's a military style configuration in terms of like the proportionality of how the optic is lined up. But the fixed power is very incredibly rugged. I have thoroughly vetted that. And I can tell you stories, and you can read my reviews and watch the videos on the fixed power. But I don't know. That's a good question. I know that the 1-4 configuration with the very small objective lens inherently, just on general trends, seems to be like a pretty good configuration in terms of ruggedness, actually.
And speaking of that reticle design, we've got a portion of the show coming up today that might make you reconsider everything you ever thought you knew about reticle design.
Stay tuned for the next portion.
Thanks again for writing in, Paul. Next up, we've got one from John. He writes in, Hi, Rex, Lew and Kacie.
Hi!
Howdy!
Surprised me. Learning a lot with the videos and podcasts. The religious portion of the show is especially good. I download the podcasts and enjoy them on my daily commute. I think that's what they're made for, isn't it?
Rock and roll, man. That's cool.
My Woodstock 7mm Remington mag feels heavier and kicks harder over the last 20 years, so I just bought a lightweight Remington 700 chambered in .270. The goal is to improve my skills and humanely harvest a mule deer up to 800 meters. A couple of questions. Number one, is the recommended terminal energy for deer 500 and elk 800?
I wouldn't give it in terms of remaining energy, in terms of, he's talking foot-pounds of energy there.
Gotcha.
Yeah, 500 is good for killing a lot of stuff. It's really a matter of sectional density, bullet construction, shot placement is your critical deal. If you hit it in the right spot, it's not going to take a lot of energy. Elephants can be killed with 140 foot-pounds of energy out of a 22 long rifle if you put it in the right spot. Karamojo Bell demonstrated that quite effectively when he was killing elephants in Africa back in the turn of the century.
You asked the right questions. Rex will get nerdy with you.
Oh, boy.
And he also writes in, thank you for sharing all your time and knowledge. Please keep the podcasts coming. And this is John from Idaho. And he signs it with Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things.
Rock and roll, man.
I like that. That's a good one.
It's good hearing from you, buddy. Thank you.
Absolutely. Remember, get in touch with us via our website, rexreviews.org. We're now on Facebook, which is new and exciting stuff. We're going to take a quick break here on the podcast and be back with another portion of the show right after this.